Hearing is most important, because hearing purifies our consciousness. Hearing directs our consciousness. Hearing uplifts our consciousness. And what we hear is what we think. And it's also what we speak, and what we speak also becomes what we think, and what we speak also directs our consciousness. So, Prabhupada instituted hearing every day, Bhagavatam. It's very important. Or at least studying his books, becoming clear about our philosophy. So, today I thought we could speak a little bit about an interesting topic, which is the caste system, because we're speaking about culture, and whenever you speak of Indian culture, then this caste system comes up. Prabhupada, of course, didn't call it caste system, called it Varna and Ashram. But this system is quite interesting because of how it's misused, and it relates to how we could misuse our positions also. So on Skype. Oh, okay. So she's on Skype, which means you're translating for her. So I don't know if you're aware, but there's a huge Muslim conversion of Hindus in India. And if you come to Mayapur, you will see many, many Muslims live here. And you won't be able to tell the difference, in many cases, between the Muslim women and the Hindu women, because they're all wearing saris, which you might find unusual for Muslim women. And the only difference is they wear saris, they cover their head, but they don't wear tika. So then you know they're not devotees, or they're not Hindus. But their parents or grandparents or great-grandparents were Hindus. And when they became Muslims, then they adopted certain habits or practices which differed from the Hindus, such as wherever you see goats being raised, that means the goats are being killed. Those are Muslims. And of course Muslims will eat cow flesh, and other cultural differences. So you may wonder why it is so many Hindus converted to the Muslim religion. There are many reasons, but one reason I wanted to present, which relates to our topic, is that in Hindu society, according to what they believe is the proper understanding of caste distinction, that your caste can get polluted by association with lower caste people. So, for example, if you are what is called untouchable, that means you're of a certain caste, you will do certain jobs that other higher caste won't do. And if you're an untouchable, if I touch you and I'm not an untouchable, I become polluted and my caste may be degraded. So the higher caste, so to speak, won't go in the homes of the untouchables, and they'll avoid them, they'll avoid touching them, because after all they're untouchable. And even if their shadow touches you, that's not good. And so according to strict, or what the Hindus believe as strict principles of Dharma, your caste can get degraded by association with lower caste people. And so one of the things that the Muslims came up with was this idea: if a Muslim pours water on you, then you're converted, and you're inconvertible. In other words, you Once converted, that's it. And now you're a Muslim. They pour water on you. Now you become a Muslim. Poof. You're a Muslim. Which of course isn't true. Or you could even, or you eat food cooked by a Muslim and you lose your caste. And, these same ideas of untouchability, then the Muslims are considered even lower because they're outside the Vedic culture. So they're not even Hindus. So that's very bad. So the Muslims would go around and pour water, say, now you become a Muslim. And then the Hindus would go to the Brahmins and say, what do I do? The Brahmins would say something like, you have to kill yourself and take birth as a Hindu, or you have to do some kind of self-purification, which is so torturous nobody would do it. So basically, they were going along with this. Whereas if they would have just said, just chant the holy name, take bath in the Ganga, or say some prayers or whatever, and say that you actually can't become a Muslim because a Muslim pours water on you, but as long as your activities are proper and pure, then you're okay. Generally, if someone would see a very materialistic person, they might bathe in the Ganga to purify themselves, but there's no question of a Hindu becoming a Muslim by water being poured on them. But these Brahmins were telling these poor Hindu people that you become Muslim. So then the Hindus were thinking, well, now what can I do? And said, I have to wait to take birth in a Hindu family again, or to commit suicide, or do something horrific. So then all these Hindus got converted to Islam. And by the tricks. I mean, there are other ways that sometimes they got converted by the sword in past times. If you like your head, then become a Muslim, because if you don't, you won't have your head. Or sometimes they can do many things, occupations. If the government becomes Muslim, then you can offer people better jobs if they're Muslim, or the same with Christian. So you become a Christian or you become a Muslim, we'll give you better jobs. So that was another preaching technique, sometimes used by Muslims and Christians, the sword. Here's the Bible and here's the sword. You don't take the Bible, you get the sword. Take the Bible, we won't use the sword, or like that. So now you look at so many Hindus became Muslims, and it was the fault of the Brahmins, because the Brahmins believed that these people were polluted, and there was nothing they could do, which has nothing to do with Shastra. Now, what's really interesting is that Shastra says, or Manu Samhita says, that the Shudras are the feet, and the Vaishyas are the legs, and the Kshatriyas are the chest, and the Brahmins are the head. So, Prabhupada says, well, you need feet, you need legs, No. The Sudras are the feet and the legs, and the Vaishyas, the stomach, Kshatriya is the chest, the arms, the strength, and then Brahmins are the head. So then Prabhupada makes the point that, well, the head's better, right? Head's better than the arms, better than the chest, better than the stomach, better than the legs. And Prabhupada said, no, you need all of them, because they all work together. They just have different functions. And what's the use of a head if you don't have legs? You just sit around and think. You can't do anything. So you're not a complete being unless you can walk, and what's the use of being able to walk if you can't eat? If your stomach doesn't function, then you're finished. So you could say your stomach is even more important, because without digesting food, then how will the rest of the body work? But the Brahmins, because it's Kali Yuga, and one of the symptoms of Kali Yuga is the Brahmins became polluted, and the Brahmins say, no, the Shudras, they're low class, low caste people, so we have nothing to do with them. They're polluting, and if we associate with them, then our caste becomes polluted. So their activities are different than ours, and we don't mix with them. So they, based on their need or desire for exploitation, created these caste distinctions, which were never the intention of the caste system. It was just a division of society based on labor, according to an individual's nature. And it was a means of organizing society in a better way so that people would be suited by nature, and also through proper training would be more suited for their particular occupation. So Varna really means occupation. It's been translated as caste, but it means occupation. So now, this is symptomatic of Kali Yuga, that anyone who gets power will tend to use it to exploit. So there are so many Brahmins who will say, no, these castes are lower and we are higher caste, we are pure. They're impure for so many reasons. Now, we know that's not true, and we know where that comes from. It comes from a mentality of exploitation. And we also know, and we've seen, that when people get power, they tend to misuse it unless they're very spiritually advanced, or unless they have high moral principles. So there was a great president of America, his name was Abraham Lincoln, and he said that if you put a man through adversity, or if a man has to face adversity, then he can tolerate it, because he really has no choice. It's just, we go through difficulty, and in order to survive, in order to be successful, in order to stay alive, what can we do? We have to tolerate, just like now. It's really hot here. So you can't do anything, you just have to survive somehow or other. So the afternoon, about 4 o'clock, all the devotees would go to the Ganga. So the Ganga is packed, and they just stay there for a couple hours just to survive the rest of the day. Or some devotees will go early in the morning, or periodically you just jump in the shower. And a few devotees are fortunate, they have air conditioning, but still, when you have air conditioning, you still have to go outside. So, you have to tolerate it. What can you do? You don't have a choice. Somehow you tolerate it. But Abraham Lincoln said, but if you really want to test a person, give them power. So he said, you don't test a person in adversity, because we have to tolerate adversity. Somehow or other we'll tolerate it. He said, but you test them by giving them power. Because if you give someone power and they can still be humble and still be in the mood of service, then that's an exalted person. And that's actually what a Brahmin is supposed to do. See, a Brahmin is supposed to be so self-controlled and so disciplined that they can be given honor and power to instruct or quote-unquote quote control, not really control in that sense, but to have control, be able to instruct and guide people, and to be given respect because they're self-controlled. So they require that respect, they need it. It's part of culture that you respect teachers. But in Kali Yuga, where that respect is given, and people misuse it. Now, I want to tell you something really nice, which illustrates this point, I think, to a wonderful degree. As you know, when a person becomes a spiritual master, they take disciples. That's the meaning of spiritual master. And a disciple means one who is disciplined. So the disciple is disciplined by the spiritual master. And the role of the disciple is to serve the spiritual master. and really to become a menial servant, and even for the disciple to think that whatever they have is really the property of their guru, not just physical possessions, but even their body and mind. So, now, in theory then, if you become guru, that means it would appear that you actually possess other people's bodies. Their bodies actually belong to you. O Gurudev, I surrender to you, body, mind, and soul. And so we know that a pure devotee doesn't think that he's the owner of the disciple, that he's the controller, that he possesses everything the disciple possesses, even the body, even though the disciple may think that way. Oh Gurudev, I'm yours. Whatever you want, you just tell me to do. Whatever you ask, I'll do. Whatever I have is yours. I surrender my life to you. That's how the disciple thinks. But the Guru doesn't think, oh, I'm the slave driver now, that I have all these surrendered people. They'll do whatever I ask. They just want to please me. So now I'll engage them and I'll exploit them. I'll take advantage of them. I'll enjoy them, or I'll enjoy this position. And I want to tell a little story to illustrate how a devotee doesn't see this way. So, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was asked, how many disciples do you have? And he actually had thousands of disciples. But he said, I only have 4 disciples. I have 2 arms and 2 legs. These are my 4 disciples. Because my arms and my legs, they do whatever I ask. They're surrendered, and I have control of them. So they're very obedient. They're very surrendered. But he didn't see his disciples as his disciples, which is quite interesting. But actually he saw them as Prabhu. Prabhu means master. And he used to call excuse me, he used to call his disciples Prabhu. And often when he would see them, he would say Daso Sme, and Daso Sme means, Das means servant, Asmi, I am. Daso Sme, I am your servant. And it said that this address of Prabhu before the time of Bhaktisiddhanta wasn't used. Now we take it for granted in ISKCON. We call one another Prabhu, right? We take that for granted. But I was told by one of the disciples of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati that that word was never used before, but he was the first one who began calling his own disciples Prabhu and teaching his disciples to call to call other devotees Prabhu. So he never saw his disciples as his disciples, but he only saw his disciples as servants, as that he is their servant. And that is the pure consciousness of the elevated soul. Now, because it's Kali Yuga, then the more a person becomes elevated, the more there is the tendency to take advantage of that position, which spoils the whole system, because the idea of the Varnashram system is that the Brahmins are the most elevated. So when we say elevated, we can look at it this way. They're the most free from the desire to exploit. They have the greatest interest of the people in mind, and they're the most austere, and they live the most simple life. And that's why you can give them power. Because in Varnashram system, they understand that the power is given to the person who's most pure. And that is why also in the Varnashram system that the Brahmins guide the Kshatriyas, because the Brahmins are considered pure. They're considered that they're so selfless that their interest is only in the welfare of others. And so they can direct the Kshatriyas, because the Kshatriyas are meant to establish Dharma. Kshatriyas are not considered as pure, and so if they're guided by the Brahmins, then their actions will be pure. So now you see in Kali Yuga how it it gets turned around, that you give someone power, and then they'll tend to misuse it. And that's what Abraham Lincoln was saying, that's the real test of the greatness of a person. So here you see the greatness of people like Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, the greatness of people like Prabhupada, that they had not only just followers, but people who were surrendering their lives to them. And they only saw themselves as servants. There was a story I just heard recently where some family of doctors came to see Srila Prabhupada, and this was probably within the last few weeks of his life. And they had come from Delhi, and as soon as they came to see him, Prabhupada said, "You must be tired, why don't you rest? You must be hungry, we'll arrange prasadam." In other words, Prabhupada was in his last days, and very, very thin. There was actually no muscle in his body. So it was very, very painful, but he was thinking about others eating and about others being properly taken care of. So that's the example of pure devotee, that even in that condition, Prabhupada was thinking about others, which is quite amazing. If you actually meditate on it, that means that Prabhupada was always thinking of the welfare of others. So that's the Brahmin. And we are also being trained to be Brahmins. We're also being trained to be gurus. So we are meant to imbibe that mentality. Whereas, although we could be in situations where we could take advantage for our own pleasure, for our own enjoyment, or take advantage to control, take advantage to manipulate situations in our favor, which is always a possibility whenever we're given a position of authority. But we, as Brahmins, at least as Vaishnavas, we cultivate Brahminical qualities. Of course, we're above Brahman, but we cultivate Brahminical qualities. So Prabhupada always taught us to be thinking about the welfare of others. And I said in the other class, I believe I said that once Prabhupada was asked how we become compassionate, and he said, "You serve the movement of compassion, and I may not be fully realized, so I have material desire, so I don't feel that I'm 100% compassionate, or I may not even feel compassionate at all, but I serve the movement of compassion." So Prabhupada established a Brahminical culture within ISKCON, and that Brahminical culture is the culture of helping people become Krishna conscious. Now, we're Vaishnavas, so how does Vaishnava and Brahminical culture relate? Well, Vaishnava culture and Brahminical culture, they're basically the same. There may be nuances, but it's a culture of goodness. And particularly Vaishnava is the culture of compassion, and it's the most outstanding quality of a Vaishnava. And compassion in this sense means that he works for the upliftment of others. Now, within our culture, as we progress in devotional service, whether we like it or not, some honor will be given to us. And we should not artificially reject that honor, because it's part of the culture, and it's good for people if they show honor to senior devotees. But we accept that honor in a humble mood. And as I said, I believe I said, I don't know if I said, but I may have said during the Vyasa ceremony, that I said that when Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was honored, that he would say, when anyone honors me, then I think they're telling me these are the qualities that I need to develop, or these are the qualities that I should work on. Not that he would think that these are the qualities I have. And when anyone criticizes me, then I think Krishna has sent this person to help me become more humble. So even though a devotee is being honored, if he's in the right consciousness, then he's not thinking that this is me, that I'm so great, or that I have a right to exploit other people. No, a devotee never thinks that way, because a devotee's heart is pure. And so when the heart is pure, purity means that he's only thinking about the welfare of others, which actually, if you consider exploitation, is quite the opposite of thinking of the welfare of others. And of course, we understand the world needs more people who will think of the welfare of others. And that was why Prabhupada wanted to create Brahmins. And that was his mission in Krishna consciousness, was to create a society of Brahmins. And he said, if there are enough genuine Brahmins in the world, then the world will change. Because there's enough people actively working to uplift the consciousness of others. There are enough people actively working out of compassion, out of interest, to help people overcome their suffering in the material world, to help people ultimately get out of the material world, and help people come to Krishna consciousness. That if there's enough people doing that, then the world will change. And that's really the essence of what it means to be a Brahmin, and more specifically the essence of what it means to be a Vaishnava. Para dukkha dukhi is the quality of a Vaishnava. That means when it's construction time now, the trucks are heading off for their construction sites. Big trucks full of sand. Anyway, there's the sound effects, the Mayapur sound effects. Create the mood here. You hear all the birds. So many birds, huh? Chanting the Vedic hymns. So, Bhagavatam says, Para dukkha dukhi, that a Vaishnava is one that feels unhappy when he sees others unhappy. And Prahlad Maharaj said, that I'm happy because I can be Krishna conscious, I can chant your glories, and I can be satisfied. So it's very interesting, this verse, because, well, he's a Vaishnava, and he, as we see, he's very compassionate, but he's saying, I'm satisfied by chanting your glories. He said, Magna Chitta, my consciousness. It's absorbed in hearing and chanting. But he said, but I'm not happy, because I'm thinking about, as Prabhupada said, all the fools and rascals who aren't Krishna consciousness. So you have this Prahlad Maharaj exemplifies this nice mood where he's saying, I'm happy in Krishna consciousness, but I'm not happy, but I do lament that other people aren't Krishna conscious. So this exemplifies the heart of a devotee. And then when the devotee's heart is there, then the devotee can only think about serving other people. And therefore it doesn't matter if he's honored. He becomes a Brahmin, he's given great honor. Becomes a Vaishnava, he's given great honor. Becomes a sannyasi, he's given great honor. He becomes a guru, he's given great honor. Because his desire is not for honor. You see, the problem is when we desire honor and get it, then we're in trouble. Or we desire control and then we get it, then we're in trouble. Whereas if we don't desire it, then no matter how much we get, it won't disturb us. And in order to be effective in spreading Krishna consciousness, some honor and some control will be given. But it's not a problem, because if I'm given honor or control, that means that I'm in a good position to help somebody. Because they honor me, that means they'll listen to me, or they'll, if I have some control, I can influence them in a way that they can be more Krishna conscious, right? So in that sense, it's good that they honor me, and it's good that I have control, because they'll listen to me. And because they listen, then I can help them. So as long as my desire is solely to help them, then I'll never be affected negatively by any amount of honor or any amount of control that I'm given. So we go back to this idea of Brahmins. Brahmins are given control, Brahmins are given honor. Now the problem is, they want control and honor because it's Kali Yuga. In Kali Yuga, everything is contaminated. And so now you put someone in a position who has control and is honored, but whose heart isn't pure, then it's dangerous. That's the problem. That's the essence of the problem. It's the essential problem. So you see within Vedic culture, honor, as we've said before, honor is always given to elevated souls, to Brahmins, to gurus, to sannyasis, to renunciates, to parents, to teachers, to the king, even other government officials. Honor is naturally given there because of their position, and they're all honored because they're seen as representatives of God. Mother is honored, father is honored. Why do we honor them? Because we see them as representatives. Just not only do we see the guru as representative of God, we see the king as representative of God. We see the mother and the father as representative of God. Therefore, we honor them. Is it bad to honor your parents? No, it's not. That's every religion teaches, honor your parents. What if your parents exploit you? Is it bad to honor them? What if they don't take care of you? What if they tell you to do something sinful? What if they exploit you? Is it bad to honor them? Yes. That's where we get the problem. And then we get the confusion, because the parents should be honored, the Brahmins should be honored, the guru should be honored. But what if they're not qualified? So then you have this example in the Bhagavatam where Lord Vishnu, in the form of Vamanadeva, came to Bali Maharaj, and Bali Maharaj's guru, Sukracharya, understood that this Brahmin was actually Vishnu, and he was going to come and take everything away from Bali. So Sukracharya said, this Brahmin's going to ask for charity, don't give it to him, because he's going to take everything. But Bali understood that this Brahmin is Vishnu, and I should give everything. So he was wondering, how is it that Sukracharya is telling me not to surrender to Vishnu, because Sukracharya is my guru. And in the past he always told me to surrender to Krishna, to Vishnu. Now he's telling me don't surrender to Vishnu. So what's going on here? So he thought about it, and he thought that I can't follow my guru anymore, because my guru, he's not acting as a guru. Isn't that interesting? So the guru should always be followed, every situation. But here Bali's not following his guru, because his guru was no longer qualified to be a guru. So this is Kali Yuga. You see, if we didn't have this problem, things would be easy. You have guru acts like a guru. You have father and mother, they act like father and mother. You have Brahmin, they act like Brahmin. You have husband, wife, they act like husband and wife. Then we can follow them and be benefited. Now in Kali Yuga, because it's mixed up, we have Brahmins that don't act as Brahmins, gurus that don't act as gurus, mothers and fathers that don't act properly. So the reason I'm explaining this is so that we understand as Brahmins and as Vaishnavas what is our position. See, and how important it is for us to develop the proper mood as servants of those we minister to, servants of those we help. Now, you might say, well, I'm not in a very exalted position, but you're going to teach Krishna consciousness to somebody. You're going to, even if it's just a new person, you're always going to be in a superior position over someone. Whoever comes to Krishna consciousness after you is junior, they'll look up to you. There's an interesting, and if you stay in Krishna consciousness long enough, let's say like Vainarati, you're like what, 34 now, 32, 34? Vainarati, do you realize in 30 years you'll be 64? You probably don't realize that, do you? Get your calculator out and add 30 to 34, and you'll be 64. I'm 64. Do you realize that someday you'll be 64? And do you realize that when you're 64 and 20-year-old devotees are going to be coming to Krishna consciousness and they're going to meet you, you're the age, you could be technically the age of their grandmother, Because if you had a child when you were 22, and your child had a child when they were 22, then, or 20, yeah, if you had a child when you were 20, they had a child when they were 20. Or not just Vaisanava, anybody. Then when you're 64, you could be a grandmother, right? So now, 20-year-olds will come to Krishna consciousness. Let's put it in perspective now. Vaisanava, do you realize that for someone who's 20 years old, someone who's 34 is really old? Like, I look at you, and you're 30 years younger than me, so you're like age of my daughter, right? But a 20-year-old looks at you and thinks, 34, that's like an adult. That's like a senior. You're almost like a senior citizen for a 20-year-old. I mean, you don't think yourself old. I don't think you're old. But a 20-year-old, a 17-year-old, you're twice as old as a 17-year-old. So naturally, if a 17-year-old, 18, 19, 20-year-old comes to Krishna consciousness, they're going to look at you and think, well, you've been a devotee 5 or 6 years, you're 34 years old. They're naturally going to respect you. You're initiated. It's natural. Now, I just want you to put things in perspective. I want you to understand that people that will naturally be given respect, and you might say, well, I don't think I'm worthy of respect. No, you'll naturally be given just by being a devotee for so many years. Now, they've done research, and what they've found is that people give themselves to religious leaders. They have deep faith in religious leaders because what religious leaders are giving people is so valuable and so important to them and so beneficial. They're giving them God. So people have this deep faith in religious leaders. And what some of the surveys have found is that people often will give and sacrifice more to priests, to have more trust in priests than they have in their own parents, even in their own husbands and wives. And you also see this in ISKCON, how much a disciple will give to their guru. And often they'll give to their guru much more than they'll give to their own mother and father. So, and this has been researched and statistically demonstrated, not only in ISKCON, but in all religious organizations. There's this deep, abiding trust and faith in spiritual leaders. Now, if a spiritual leader, because of that trust and faith, misuses his position, it's one of the worst possible things that they could do, because it breaks the trust of that individual. And that individual had extreme trust. So we all know this, and we've seen this. Some of you have experienced it yourself, and we've seen it. And some of you, of course, are fortunate that this has never happened to you. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because as devotees, by remaining in Krishna consciousness year after year after year, by default you kind of get moved up. So people will naturally respect you. Vaisanava says she doesn't feel young. Well, you can still dance, so you're young. This is how we define young. As long as you can dance in the kirtan, you're young. So by remaining in Krishna consciousness, year after year after year after year after year after year, you get elevated. You say, how do I get elevated? Because new people will respect you. Because of the time you put in Krishna consciousness. Just the fact that, let's say, you're a devotee for 20 years and somebody joins, they'll think, wow, I have so much respect for you. You've been a devotee for 20 years. They'll look up to you. They'll trust you. When you speak, they'll listen. It's just a fact, and it gets worse, so to speak, not worse. But if you're looking at it like, oh, I don't want to be respected, well, it'll get worse as you continue in devotional service. Because as you get older, you'll be more and more respected. But it's good if your heart is in the right place, because then you can use this respect to help people, because they'll trust you. You can help them. And because they trust you, you always have to remember that you have to act properly, and you always have to have their interest in mind. So whenever a person says, I'll do whatever you say, whatever you tell me, I'll do, you should never think, oh, this is great. I have somebody who'll do whatever I say. This is what I always wanted. This is actually why I came to the material world. And now I finally come to Krishna consciousness, and this desire is being fulfilled. That I have all these people, they'll do whatever I say, because now I'm in charge of this program, or I'm in charge of this temple, or I've become a sannyasi, or I've become a guru. And I have all these people, they'll just do whatever I want. We should never, ever, ever think like that. We should only think, now I can be a better servant. Krishna has given me a position of more power, people have more trust in me. All this means is better servant. And if we always think, as Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur thought, everyone is my Prabhu, which is the reality, even if you put in a position higher, at least externally, but it doesn't have to mean higher in your consciousness. It doesn't mean you have to think you're better. Just because externally you have a higher position, if you always see everyone as Prabhu, and you always see, I am a servant, I'm not a master, then the Krishna consciousness movement will expand around the world successfully. You will be successful in your spiritual life, and you will be a real Brahmin and a real Vaishnava. This is really what it means to be a real Brahmin and Vaishnava. And as I said, this is why Brahmins are honored and glorified, because of their purity. So this is what we need to cultivate. And when we have thousands and thousands, or hundreds of thousands, or millions of devotees who've cultivated this quality, where they see themselves as servants, and they're in anxiety to see other people who aren't Krishna conscious, and they give their lives to making people Krishna conscious, then the world will change. But if people get into positions of power and utilize them for some personal interest, then that contaminates the purity of Krishna consciousness. And Prabhupada said there should be no personal motivation in anything we do. And if there's no personal motivation, if the motivation is only to serve Guru, serve Krishna, and serve others, everything's perfect. And we will never have trouble in Krishna consciousness. And Kali Yuga enters. I don't know if you're aware of this, but you may know the story that Parikshit Maharaj was visiting one sadhu. And the sadhu was in meditation. And he wanted some water, and the sadhu stayed in meditation. And Parikshit Maharaj, by divine arrangement, became upset and took a snake, or a dead snake, and garlanded him out of frustration. And the Brahmin's son cursed Parikshit Maharaj and said, you will die of it. There's a thing called an animal, it's a half bird, half snake, and he'll bite you and you'll die in 7 days. So Parikshit Maharaj understood this is divine arrangement. He accepted the curse. Didn't have to, but he did. He had the power to counteract it. But Prabhupada said this was the beginning of Kali Yuga, because no Brahmin would curse a great king like Parikshit Maharaj. But this Brahmin ignorant boy did this. So when the Brahmins became contaminated, Kali Yuga begins. So that means Krishna consciousness is meant to counteract the evil influences of Kali Yuga, correct? And so we can understand from the story that the evil influences of Kali Yuga are counteracted by Brahmins acting properly. And the evil influences of Kali Yuga are expanded, increased, when Brahmins don't act properly. So you might say, but I'm not initiated as a Brahmin, but in Krishna consciousness, we're all learning how to be Brahmins. Our culture is Brahminical. So you might say, but, you're talking about Varnashram, but within the Krishna consciousness movement, we may take so many services according to our nature, but Prabhupada said, but we're above Varnashram, we're all Vaishnavas. So that means our culture is Vaishnava, our culture is Brahminical, our culture is Sattvic. You see in the times of Mahaprabhu, he just put a slap in the face of Varnashram. I mean, look at Thakur was a Muslim. Ramananda Roy, who Mahaprabhu said, I learned about Krishna consciousness from Ramananda Roy, was working as a Shudra externally. Was he a Shudra by quality? As a profession, yes, but as a culture, he was a Vaishnava. He was above Brahmin. So we're all meant to cultivate Brahminical qualities as Vaishnavas, qualities of the mode of goodness, cleanliness, right, regulation, purity of thought, purity of words, purity of action, sattvic living, sattvic eating, right, sense control, discipline, tolerance, samodamas, tapo, sucham. These are Brahminical qualities. Sama, he's equal. Dhamma, he gives. Samodamas tapo, sucham, he gives in charity. He's sense controlled. He does austerity. Socham, he's clean. Shantir, tolerant. Arjavam, honest. So many qualities, so many verses, so many qualities. So these are the qualities that we're meant to live by. You know, now we have our own culture which we grew up in, right? So some of that culture may be good and some of that culture may not be good. But we have this Brahminical culture, whether we're initiated as Brahmins or not, this is how we're living. We're meant to live a more pure life, a more sattvic life. We're very clean, regulated, we're cultured in our dealings. And now you might say, okay, that all sounds good, but I don't always see that in my own life, and I don't always see that in other devotees. Yeah, that is the culture that we may have been influenced by, but that's not the culture we're meant to live by. Now we're meant to live by this higher culture. So, but still, you know, the essence of being a Vaishnava is bhakti, and that's why it doesn't matter what varna you come from, and that's why Mahaprabhu engaged people from different varnas, just to show that it doesn't matter, and that everybody can be Krishna conscious. He even liberated the dog. So if a dog can do it, then we can do it. And I don't know if you're aware of the fact that Prabhupada got a lot of what we call slack. Atmananda, you know what slack is? People give you slack. Slack is like negativity. How should we describe it? Slack. How do you translate slack into Spanish? Negative criticism. Yeah, negative criticism, slack. Don't give me any slack. I'm going to do this, and don't give me slack. Slack also means your negative criticism is aimed at stopping you from doing that. So when you say, don't give me any slack, you know, don't prevent me from doing this because you don't agree. So, what's the Spanish word for slack? Don't, in this context, don't give me any slack. You can write it down. So, Prabhupada had made Westerners devotees, and he got a lot of slack from a certain section of Indians, Brahmins, and even from some of his godbrothers, that we're outside of the culture, and so we're not qualified. And Prabhupada's whole point was that Mahaprabhu came for everybody, and if you no me critique, doesn't sound as good as slack. Don't criticize. Got to be a better way of saying that. No me slake. Don't give me. No me done. Or how do you say done? Don. Done slake. Don't give me no slack. So Prabhupada was getting criticized all over the place. But his point was that this was the mood of Mahaprabhu. Mahaprabhu was opening the storehouse of love of God and giving it to everyone. So it was a real slap in the face of caste Brahmanism. And caste Brahmanism is all about exploitation. We're superior, we're better. And it's alive and well in India, because India is very caste-oriented. Of course, the younger generation, they don't really see much difference between the castes. And so many of the modern people today want to fight against casteism, because they see that if you give everyone an equal opportunity for education, then people can equally succeed. But in general, maybe not exactly equally, but they can be. But some so-called lower class people can succeed as much or more than some so-called higher caste people. And so they're seeing it more as depriving people of opportunity, so they're fighting against it. And also what you see is there are many so-called higher class people who are not actually higher class. They have a Brahmin name and they wear a thread, but by action they're not higher class. So you have this whole problem in India today. The Brahmins don't act as Brahmins. And some so-called lower class people, if given opportunity, they could be trained as Brahmins, such as ourselves. But in India, the Brahmins aren't going to train lower class people as Brahmins. So Prabhupada did that. So that was created a sensation that, you don't go out and take these Malechas. They're not even part of the Vedic culture. They're worse than Shudras, and you don't make them Brahmins. Now, we have a monopoly on being Brahmins. Now you're bringing all these other people in to be Brahmins. This was heretical. So there's a big outrage about this. And they were trying to say these people are not qualified. And so Prabhupada would always say, he said, look it's based on guna and karma. And Krishna says that, Chaturvanya Mayashrishta guna karma vibhagasa. Your quality and your karma, your work, your quality and your work, that's where it's at. That's the qualification. So, I'll tell you something interesting. I don't know if I told you this before, but traditionally, when you were initiated, you weren't given Harinam initiation. You were given what we call second initiation. Well, you're given Harinam, you're given second initiation. There's all one initiation. But when Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati began spreading Krishna consciousness, he divided the initiation up into two. So at first he would give the Harinam, and then they would take their vows. And then later, if they were qualified, he would give second initiation. And the explanation is because he was now going out to spread Krishna consciousness to people outside of Brahminical and Vaishnava culture. And so they needed to be purified first by chanting, because they were coming from lower class or lower caste or lower modes. And so by chanting they would become purified, and then they were situated in Sattva Gun, then they would be given Brahminical initiation, which is called Diksha. Really, technically, the word Diksha is for this Brahminical initiation. And Harinam, that everyone can do, even without initiation. But you can't chant Gayatri without initiation. So anyway, so they would give everyone Harinam. That would be considered a first initiation, a connection with the Guru. They would make some vows, and then they would get second initiation. So even Prabhupada said that first initiation, the holy name is enough, and then we won't give second initiation until someone is very, very steady in following their vows. So, am I coming to New Jersey? If you and Guru Nishna arrange it, I will come. And as far as more people listening to the class, you can all share these classes. And Guru Nishna's posting them. So if you want to share them, feel free to share them. And we have 2 minutes left. Do you have any questions? Or you just want to listen? We could have a moment of silence. We can just listen to the birds. You hear the birds? I don't know what kind of birds those are. I always thought those were pigeons. Hoo, 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 hoo. They're all chanting Vedic hymns, all the birds. Can you hear them? In the holy Dham, the birds they're all chanting the Vedic hymns. Yes, it's true. Okay, so Guru Nishna Marina will arrange for me to come to New Jersey, to the wonderful city of Edison, or Tawaka, or both, to do some kind of wonderful programs. In July or August, I'll be available. From the middle of July onwards. The middle of July to the middle of August is when I'm probably most available. And we'll see. Maybe even the beginning of July I could pop through on my way back from America. Okay, so you can hear the birds, yeah. Maybe they're chanting Nitai Gauranga. So, all glories to all the Brahmins. All glories to all the Vaishnavas, who are better than Brahmins, because their hearts are pure and they only desire the welfare of others.